Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Replace GSA on your Sitecore site with AI-powered search webinar session. I'll be your host. My name is Clara Boulanger. I work on the marketing team here at Coveo, and I'm really excited to be a part of today's session. I'm also thrilled to be joined by our speaker, Paul Sheridan, who is a sales engineer at Coveo. I have a couple of housekeeping items to cover quickly before we get started. First, everyone is in listen-only mode. However, we do want to hear from you during today's presentation. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to send those along using the Q&A section on your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive the presentation within 24 hours of the conclusion of the event. Finally, there will be a brief survey at the end of the session. Please help us improve future webinars by providing your feedback on the webinar content and experience. For those of you just joining us, welcome to our Replace GSA on your Sitecore site with AI-powered search webinar session. Now let's get started. Paul, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Clara, and welcome everyone to today's session. We do a monthly webinar session, essentially a brief demo and presentation on Coveo for Sitecore. And this month we decided to have a bit of a different focus for the session. In fact, focusing on projects where the Google Search Appliance is currently in use on Sitecore sites, and of course the need to replace Google Search Appliance, as it's very shortly going to be no longer supported by Google, no longer working. So a bit of a different focus on today's session. We're going to walk through a few slides on the challenges and possible approaches to GSA replacement, pretty much specific to Sitecore implementations, although going perhaps a bit beyond that as well. We'll get into that in detail and show you a couple of demos of customer sites who have replaced Google Search Appliance with Coveo in particular for the Sitecore implementations. As Clara had mentioned, my name is Paul. I'm a sales engineer here at Coveo. Been here about 3 years or so and do a lot of work both on our Sitecore line of business, but also with all of our other lines of business and the Coveo platform as well. And it's very good to meet you all. So with that out of the way, again, just to reiterate why I'm here today, and hopefully why you're here today as well. It's really to address the challenges that many of our customers and hopefully some of you as well are facing with regard to the Google Search Appliance going away. Just a really brief bit of history, possibly redundant to many of you. The Google Search Appliance was introduced in the early 2000s as an appliance, a piece of hardware with software installed on it, and really intended to be an easy to use and easy to maintain and honestly quite cheap approach to indexing content, making content searchable. Of course, with the Google brand name on it, it was a very trusted appliance and a very simple way to set up search for websites and potentially also for corporate intranets as well. We did see some customers of GSA really just using it as a very straightforward yellow box. Here's search, go and crawl my websites or my content sources, and don't worry about configuring it in any sort of custom way. But there are also on the other end, of course, and perhaps some of you fall into this as well, some GSA customers who went quite a lot further in terms of customization, tuning, reporting capabilities. They're often engaging with Google partners to do those sort of deployments, to build connectors to different kinds of data sources, and to tune relevance and so on. So there's a real range of experiences, I think, with the GSA, from very, very simple, just crawl my website, through to much more complex engagements. Now, of course, about 2 years ago, Google did announce that they were going to be ending the Google Search Appliance and Google Simple Search as well. And now, of course, everyone who's a current customer of those products is looking for a replacement. And of course, the Google Site Search has now also expired as well. For those of you not familiar with Google Site Search, it was an even simpler approach to website search, but did include the requirement, I guess, really to provide advertising-related results along with the stuff that's been crawled from your own sites. So, brief history there, and you're probably all well aware of all that. We see from our conversations with people who are currently Google Search Appliance customers and GSS customers as well, a number of possible approaches to deal with this this need to replace the current search technology. One, and perhaps the very simplest, is some people are looking for really just a like-for-like replacement. I've got a simple GSA setup right now, crawling perhaps my externally facing website or websites, and I really just want like-for-like replacement. It's an interesting possible approach, and there are some vendors out there who really focus on that as well. I don't really feel that Coveo is one of those. If you're really just looking for like replacement, there are possibly some other options that may be appropriate for you to simply crawl your website and provide very, very basic search. I've said in this slide here, if search and relevance is not so important for you, you just need to have a search box on your website. I would suggest that there are some perhaps cheaper approaches out there. However, if you are looking to perhaps make some improvements, to move to a more up-to-date technology, to change, as we'll see in a moment, the hardware requirements, perhaps to integrate more tightly, in particular with your Sitecore content, and potentially some other content sources as well, which we'll talk about in detail as we go through this, then I think it's really worthwhile to have a look at Coveo for Sitecore, and we'll go through in detail why we think that is the case. There are some considerations also about how you would like to, how or where perhaps you would like to actually have your new search solution deployed. Are you considering moving towards the cloud? There are some potentially good reasons for that in terms of not needing to maintain hardware. Are you looking at perhaps an on-premises solution? Are you looking at some sort of hybrid? There are considerations to be made on your side, certainly, in terms of what's acceptable to your environment. In addition, I guess, and part of that consideration might be where is your Sitecore content? Where is your content management system located? A lot of emphasis these days on moving Sitecore potentially to, say, Azure hosted or cloud deployments, not necessarily requiring that you have on-premises Sitecore instances. So certainly the decision about where your search solution should be located, how it should be hosted, comes into play along with the rest of the decisions that you might be making about other data sources and other applications that are part of your website solution, for example. And I guess as you're considering what the best going forward search solution is for you, there are considerations above and beyond perhaps your company's website. Are there other enterprise needs, other data sources that might be important to you, internal-facing use cases for search as well? There certainly are a number of people who use the Google Search Appliance for internal-facing intranet search, as well as for, say, an outward-facing website, whether that content is from Sitecore or not, or combining together various different kinds of data sources. So these are just all things that I think you're probably already well aware of as well, but things that we think it's worth considering as you're looking at a possible replacement for your Google Search Appliance. I would like to just talk a little more about Google Search Appliance, and I'm not the world's biggest expert on Google Search Appliance. There are lots of great partners out there, and I know some of them are on this call here, who perhaps are more knowledgeable than I about the pluses and minuses of the Google Search Appliance. Great basic query suggestions, search analytics reports, easy to use is probably the biggest thing about the Google Search Appliance. It tended to be depending on how you implemented it, something simple to set up and not requiring a lot of ongoing care and feeding, again, depending on how important relevance is to you, how important the tuning of results are to you. Certainly a number of different kinds of connectors to different kinds of data sources, often implemented by Google partners as well. And the ability to respect security from these different data sources as well, with some exceptions, which perhaps we'll talk about in a little bit. On the negative side, and really specific to this webinar in particular, GSA really had no direct integration to Sitecore, really treating the Sitecore content management system as just another website. That said, ways of feeding content to Google Search Appliance to be indexed, such as feeds, perhaps Google XML feeds, indexing sitemaps, crawling the website, all reasonable approaches to indexing a content management system, but really lacking that that direct integration, understanding of Sitecore specific security, any properties or metadata for your Sitecore content that might not be exposed, in the published page, but may still be important, and the actual search interface that you build or configure with Google Search Appliance is something separate from Sitecore. You're not building a search page within Sitecore, or you weren't building a search page within Sitecore when you were building a Google Search Appliance page. We'll get into why that may be important to you in a little bit. Somewhat limited data sources. Again, Google partners were certainly able to build a variety of kinds of connectors which they could sell or provide to customers as well. But in many cases, really, GSA was just configured as being a web crawler with the possibility of pushing some content to it via XML feeds. And ability to really tune relevance. There's certainly things that can be done or could be done with GSA to tune relevance, whether by manual rules or potentially learning a bit from user behavior, essentially promoting pages that get clicked on a little more. The reference here to some basic use of machine learning. GSA had some capabilities in that area, but this is relevance is for our customers at any rate becoming more and more important. The ability to have some control and some understanding of relevance, of really the impact on users of the order in which results are returned. And I really think Coveo for Sitecore in particular provides our customers with both the ability to define these manual rules for tuning relevance and also to learn from user behavior to make better and better query suggestions, to make better relevance tuning happen based on actual user behavior on your site. So, this is an opportunity to really start to think about moving to perhaps some more modern, more advanced options with regard to site search, especially for your Sitecore content. So what is Coveo bringing to the table here? Well, Coveo has been a Sitecore partner for about 7 years now, continually improving and upgrading our integration with Sitecore as a data source, as well as, of course, improving our platform, effectively the search platform that the Coveo for Sitecore solution is built upon and shares with our other lines of business as well. In particular, over the last, I would say, 2.5 years, we've really been focused on a cloud-based solution, really search as a service, Coveo running in the cloud, providing you with a search capability that you don't actually need to maintain the infrastructure for. That said, for Coveo for Sitecore, there is a component of Coveo that is installed on your Sitecore server or servers. It's a Sitecore package, which allows you to, as you publish new content from Sitecore, to push that content to Coveo automatically to be indexed immediately. So no scheduled re-indexing required for that content. Other aspect, of course, of a cloud-based solution, above and beyond not requiring you to manage the infrastructure, we do provide scalability automatically, high availability, disaster recovery, fast query results, of course, as expected from any search technology. And again, this direct integration to Sitecore, both from the point of view of indexing content, it's pushed to Coveo to be indexed immediately, but also from the point of view of configuring your search interface within, say, the Sitecore Experience Editor, which we'll show you in just a few moments. I've possibly talked about a couple of these bullet points a little bit already, but we'll just sort of go through them briefly once again. Again, the integration of Coveo with Sitecore really on two fronts, primarily on the indexing side. Again, as I've mentioned, content is pushed to Coveo through the search provider API of Sitecore itself. And I would also note that in addition to the actual content of pages, and of course you can define what parts of pages you want Coveo to index, leaving out headers, footers, sidebars, those sorts of things. You can also configure what metadata is important to be indexed, again, whether it's actually published in the page or not. We do also, where appropriate, index the security or permissions information with any Sitecore content in order to be able to limit user access to secured content. And potentially, if you're using Sitecore personalization, which is, of course, a major selling point of Sitecore as a content management system, we can also index the persona and profile card information associated to your content in order to be able to promote or boost content that you're going to the effort of tagging within Sitecore as being appropriate to a particular persona. So if a user is hitting your Sitecore site, navigating around, doing some things, Sitecore can recognize, oh, this user is of persona A versus persona B. You've gone to the trouble within Sitecore of creating rules to say, well, these pieces of content over here are most appropriate to persona A. When a user does a search using Coveo for Sitecore, we can actually automatically promote that content that you've tagged in that way. So this is an opportunity, again, perhaps to, as you're starting to deploy, or perhaps you've already deployed, Sitecore personalization, to take advantage of that, to integrate that tightly into the search experience for your users as well. Item number 3 here, from an ease of use point of view, I think this is specific to the experience of creating, configuring, maintaining, modifying the search experience within your Sitecore website. The fact that we provide not only the integration on the indexing side, but the integration on the search component side. We provide a set of renderings and components for Sitecore that enable you to create and configure your search experience, to drag and drop components such as facets, search box, ordering components, boosting components within your Sitecore experience editor. I'll show you a little bit of that as well. But the idea is that this enables your Sitecore content managers, the people who are creating your templates, creating the search experience, to also control and manage the search experience within Sitecore without having to call in someone who's, a GSA expert perhaps or some other search technology expert to build an external search experience here. This is something that's integrated right into Sitecore. Then I think the last point on this slide, out of the box, Coveo provides some very rich usage analytics and dashboard capabilities to help you understand, well, how is search working on my site? What are people searching for? What are they not finding? What are they finding? What content is actually the most popular? Perhaps even broken down by user context, whether it's a persona or their location, or whether they're mobile or non-mobile users. All of that information is logged, and you're enabled to use some very nice usage analytics dashboard tools to analyze that information, both from the point of view of, well, just understanding what's happening on your site, but also from the point of view of potentially improving how search works. We'll get into this a little bit as well, but the ability to, I believe I hinted at earlier, to either manually create rules to tune search. Perhaps I want to promote my frequently asked question portion of my site. Perhaps I want to promote certain products that are on sale. There are very easy ways to configure rules to promote or demote certain kinds of content within search. In addition to this, Coveo also, based on this usage analytics information, has built a series of machine learning models, effectively, to take advantage of that usage analytics information, to learn from user behavior, to make better type-ahead query suggestions, to make recommendations for content. Other people who've looked at this page, for example, have also gone and looked at these pages, and to promote, again, the best results that other people who are doing similar queries have gotten to eventually. We'll get into some examples of that as well, but these are all out-of-the-box capabilities that Coveo provides, in particular as part of our integration to Sitecore. I would also touch on, just briefly, the Coveo platform. So while Coveo has a terrific integration with Sitecore, we also have connectivity to a wide variety of other data sources and an indexing API as well, a variety of ways to get to content, whether it's on other blog sites that perhaps you manage, your YouTube channel, custom ODBC databases, Salesforce CRM content, SharePoint pages. So whether you're looking at a internally facing corporate intranet application or an externally facing product website or informational website, Coveo has the connectivity capabilities here to include all the content that you need, including your Sitecore content, within your search results here. I think we covered most of the rest of what's on this slide here as well, on the previous slide, but I did want to touch on the fact that there is Coveo for Sitecore as a product. It's based on the common Coveo platform, very powerful cloud-based search as a service solution. Just going to briefly go through this slide. I'm not going to read all the words on the slide, but when we look at search in general, this isn't really specific to Sitecore, but search in general, what we really feel is that there are three components that add up to, if you will, relevance. And we really try to focus on relevance as opposed to simply a search box. So the relevance of content that is returned to your users is the most important thing that you can provide from, well, okay, frankly, a search box. And to us, that relevance is really made up of three different areas. So the content itself, of course, the ability to index, make searchable that content, and to control what pages, what parts of pages, what database entries, what metadata you actually want to index, making sure that that's the most important, the most relevant content. Of course, there are what I guess you might call basic search capabilities that kind of fit in there with content, the ability to search for synonyms, the ability to search multiple different languages, to filter or facet by various metadata properties, for example. All of that kind of fits into what I would call the content bucket. What we start to consider even more so, though, is a concept like context. So who is this user that's on my website, that's on my corporate intranet searching? What's going to be important to them? Context might consist of a number of different things, potentially, depending on your use case. It might include a Sitecore persona. So again, Sitecore does the work of identifying, based on user behavior, what persona does this person fit into? Again, that's kind of rules driven and within Sitecore. But that contextual information can be passed to Coveo as part of a query so that we can tune the results according to that persona, boost the right content, filter out content that won't be of interest to this kind of person. Context might also include things like the user's location. So based on their IP address, we can derive where are they roughly, what city, what region, what country. That may be an interesting way to tune results as well. You may, if you're a person like me who's based in Canada, it may be important to automatically tune my search results to exclude content that comes from perhaps a different country or region. Then there could be custom contexts. If a user is logged into your website or your intranet, you're going to know a lot more about them. That information can be passed to Coveo as part of this context, again, to tune results based on, well, what job is it that I do? I'm a sales engineer. I'm not in our marketing department. I'm likely to be interested in different kinds of information. And then the third of the buckets that we look at here is typically the intent. Effectively learning from user behavior. What have people searched for? Have they gotten results? Have they gotten results they clicked on? Did they purchase something perhaps based on those searches, those clicks? How did they refine their search? What did they click on next? All of that information, that analytical information, is, again, not only reportable, not only can you report on it, it's also fed into our machine learning engine in order to start to learn and promote different kinds of content and queries. And to us, these three buckets or pillars or whatever you'd like to call them really start to add up to relevance. Now, clearly, relevance is in the eye of the beholder, as we often say. It's most important to make sure that people are getting the information that is in fact useful to them. And based on that, I would say that it is, again, depending on how important relevance is to you and your customers, I would say it's important to look at these behavioral analytics statistics, look at how well is search working, perhaps make modifications to the rules you've defined, perhaps create new content where necessary to make sure that relevance, customer satisfaction, those sort of statistics are in fact adequate or beyond adequate, excellent, let's say. So I would say it's an important thing to, on an ongoing basis, make sure that you understand what's happening on your site, not just from a content point of view, but also from a search point of view. With that, that's lots of presentation stuff. I'm going to swap over and show you a couple of examples of websites that have implemented Coveo on Sitecore, and also show you a little bit, just a taste, of the back end of Coveo, both integrated into Sitecore and the actual platform itself. So I'm going to start off with a relatively new customer of Coveo, deployed by a mutual partner, a Sitecore implementation partner, who also gained quite a bit of experience with Coveo during this implementation. And this is the American Organization of Pilots, AOPA. I'm probably got their acronym wrong, and I apologize for that. But they've implemented Coveo here, indexing Sitecore content, but also a wide variety of other sources as well. There's training information, there's a blog, as you can see, there's a discussion boards, and all kinds of interesting things on their site. They've tagged their content effectively, both inside Sitecore and, of course, outside Sitecore, in terms of metadata or informational tags here, as well as content type information. They have some secured content, members-only content. These filters or facets over here on the left-hand side are standard Coveo components. They can be styled, of course, to suit the needs of your particular site, but they are standard components that you can deploy, as we'll see in a moment, within your Sitecore search page. As I start to type in a query here, we can see that I can make very good quality query suggestions. And this, again, is derived from user behavior on the site. Now, I've typed in flight plans, but we're actually also suggesting flight planning, flight planner, flight review, things that are close to, but not exactly what I'm typing in as well. And this is really an example of Coveo's machine learning as applied to query suggestion. So this is learning from user behavior on this particular site to make suggestions about what have been good queries that other people have done, perhaps even other people like me, if you're dividing up user behavior into different usage analytics or machine learning models potentially. So I can certainly do my exact search for flight plans, I can search for flight planner or AOPA flight planner and so on, and I can get my results back, obviously, in a very quick amount of time. You'll also notice, and some of this is relatively basic search stuff, but the ability here to search not just for exactly what I typed in flight planner, but we're also highlighting flights and plans and those sort of things as well. These results are also being tuned based on, once again, machine learning, good quality results that have been accessed more often by users who've done similar queries to this are getting boosted up to the top or higher up in the result list at any rate. There may also be some more manual rules in there as well to tune results based on what the administrators of the system want to promote. And of course, you have the ability to drill into different kinds of content, whether it's their standard site, they have an e-pilot newsletter as well. Advocacy is a really important aspect of what the AOPA does as well. And you see the tags here, the facets, if you will, adjusting automatically based on any selections that I make here. You do also have the ability to sort your content, again, based on relevance, but in some cases, the most recent content may in fact be the most appropriate to bring up, especially perhaps for their newsletters and blog posts and so on as well. And again, all of this is very standard components provided by the Coveo for Sitecore integration. And I think this is really quite a nice, relatively simple implementation of Coveo for Sitecore here. I think the more complex aspect of what was done on this site was, in fact, including content from quite a variety of different data sources that have very different structures and metadata and such associated with them. I'll show you another example of an implementation of Coveo for Sitecore. Once again, quite a recent customer of ours, and this is the tourism board of the province of Saskatchewan here in Canada, where there are lots of moose. But they're very welcoming moose, so that's a good thing. Now, once again, as you start to type in a query, we'll see here that that we can make good quality query suggestions, even though I haven't really finished typing what I'm typing. Of course, this is what users expect on a website nowadays. And in fact, of course, the ability to do this in a manner that is specific to the content of this particular site, very important. What they're searching for here is primarily accommodations and information about places you might want to go in Saskatchewan. I think one of the interesting things that they've done, again, this was implemented by a really well-qualified Coveo for Sitecore partner. One of the interesting things that they've done is be able to filter results or sort results based on location. So as an example, if I say that I'm in Saskatoon, I can sort my results not just by relevance, which of course is important, but also by distance. Show me the nearest fishing camps to the city of Saskatoon. So an interesting application, taking Coveo, taking search as an experience, perhaps to a level above simply textual search and relevant results. But these are, again, the kind of things that you might want to consider from a use case point of view as you're looking at, well, we have to replace GSA anyway. What's important to our customers, to our users on our website? These sort of the ability to sort by distance, the ability to sort by price if you're more of a product-oriented website. These sort of things may well be worth considering as you're looking at this project. With that, and of course, we have many, many more examples of very different kinds of websites running Coveo and Sitecore. And if you reach out to us or to your Sitecore implementation partner after this, we'd be happy to share appropriate examples based on your own particular challenges. With that, though, what I'm going to do next is show you a little bit of the Coveo platform backend, and then Coveo as integrated into Sitecore itself from a developer administrator point of view. And then we'll wrap up for today's session. So this is the Coveo Cloud Administration interface. Just going to show you a couple of things here. I think one of the, again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most useful, interesting, heavily used sections tends to be this usage analytics reports and dashboards. And these are very configurable. Our partners or ourselves can work with you to configure a dashboard that makes sense, that's appropriate to your particular needs. But typically, the things you're going to be looking at will be, of course, what are the most common queries, the top documents people click on, documents, pages, products, however you want to call them. Contextual information about your users. In this case, I have a couple little pie charts that show me where people are coming from based on, again, their IP address, although we don't store their IP address, but we can derive from that information about where they're located, region, city, country, what have you, whether they're on a mobile device, non-mobile device, what kind of browser they're using, how busy is my site in general. But then I think what may even get more interesting tends to be things like top queries that don't have any results, top queries that don't lead to users clicking on anything or purchasing something, et cetera, et cetera. And this is information that you can use to improve your site. I think of queries without results as being, this is a clue here that somebody's asking you a question on your site and you don't have any information for them. So this is an opportunity perhaps to create some new content to meet the needs of the users who are on your site who are telling you this, or potentially it's more of a matter of simply tagging your content with different keywords or using Coveo's synonyms or thesaurus capability to deal with situations where people are just using slightly different terminology than you are within their query. So often what people will do is take the information, not every day, but perhaps on a relatively regular basis, the information that they learn from these sort of dashboards and apply them to what we call query pipelines. Query pipelines are essentially a set of rules to govern search, to tell us what to actually search for when a user does something. You'll notice that you can define more than one query pipeline. So you might have different sets of search rules for your internal-facing search application versus external. You might have different sets of rules for users from Canada versus users from Europe, perhaps. And you might also consider doing A/B testing. So I'll show you what these rules are in just a second, but if you're defining some new rules, you want to try out some new synonyms or boosting types of rules, but you don't want to deploy them just yet. You want to do some A/B testing. You can send, say, 10% of your users to this new pipeline and measure those results. Look at those dashboards. Understand, is this actually working well? This is actually kind of a major differentiator from Google Search Appliance. Never really had this capability. If you defined new rules in Google Search Appliance, they went live like that. I mean, you might have a testing environment, but this is really more for A/B testing for your real users, your real customers in your production environment. So this is a really interesting way to work with these sorts of rules. Just really briefly, the kinds of things you can define in a query pipeline might include your synonyms. It might include what in the GSA world we call key matches, but we call featured results, top results for particular searches, stop words, words that we leave out of searches, and perhaps more complex or richer, perhaps, ranking expressions to boost certain kinds of content. For example, here I've got a little rule that says if the title of a document or a page includes the word FAQ, let's give that a nice big boost because I know that my frequently asked questions pages are really effective. They help solve customer problems. Let's promote those automatically. Lots of other things you can do in here as well to really configure, customize how search works. And of course, this is also where you can define the machine learning models by which we learn to automatically promote certain kinds of content or make better query suggestions. But we keep that area relatively simple. You don't have to do too much in the way of training. We're learning from actual user behavior rather than you having to manage a training set of data. Again, this is a super high-level brief overview of Coveo Cloud and Coveo for Sitecore. We'd be really happy to talk to you in more detail about your particular requirements, of course. But what I will show you next is what Coveo looks like really within Sitecore itself. So I think I've probably been logged out, so let me just log back into Sitecore here. As I mentioned, there is a Coveo module that gets installed onto your Sitecore server or servers, and you can see it here in the Sitecore control panel. There are a variety of resources available to you here. A link to that Coveo Cloud administration console, of course. You can define the configuration of what pages, parts of pages, what metadata you want to have indexed. You really manage the Coveo index itself as you would for your Solr or Lucene indexes through the standard indexing manager. You'll notice that Coveo simply replaces your master and web index from Sitecore, or potentially lives alongside of the Solr or Lucene version of that index. Again, as you publish new content, it gets pushed to Coveo through the indexing pipeline and indexed pretty much immediately. Then from a user interface point of view, and I promised to show you that, if I go into my Sitecore content editor, you can see that I've defined a few different search interfaces, search pages here. I'm going to go in and look at this in the Sitecore Experience Editor. And what I'd just like to emphasize here, I'm not going to go again into all of the details of this, but what I guess I'd like to emphasize here again is that this ability to create your search interface within the Experience Editor allows you to give this task effectively to people who are Sitecore administrators, Sitecore content managers. They're comfortable with defining templates, they're comfortable with Sitecore in general. Well, they can also start to use the Coveo components here, such as filters and facets. They can add a new component in various locations. We can also now support the Sitecore Experience Accelerator to make it even easier to add and manage the components that you want to deploy into Sitecore. You don't have to use SXA, but you can. So being able to do things like say, well, which Sitecore field should this particular facet be based on? I'm tied right into Sitecore here. I can see what are the fields that are available from Sitecore that are able to be used as facets. So I can simply create one here. There are lots of options for how I might want to configure how this facet should work. What order should the results, should the tags essentially be presented in, alphabetical, based on the number of occurrences as they are here. Limiting the scope, dealing with calculated fields, lots and lots of capabilities here, but it's not something you have to write code to do. And that's again, a major difference between building a GSA search interface and building a search interface and maintaining it within Sitecore. There are also a number of options available, and I'm going to click here on the overall search interface. Options here to once again tune results, boost results, or filter results based on Sitecore properties of your content. And you'll see here if I go into the rules editor, let's look at this one here, a filtering rule where I'm filtering based on the Sitecore template. I only want to return a particular kind of page for this particular Sitecore search page. And it's tied right into the Sitecore content tree. You can see here that I'm basing this on templates. I've got a series of templates in my catalog. I only want to return commerce products here. Whoops. But I could, pardon me, on the other hand, select other templates or other page types, for example, to filter my results. So again, something that your Sitecore content managers will be comfortable to work with in order to have really quite tight and rich control over how search is going to work on their site. You'll also see here, this is where we tie together that concept of query pipeline on the Coveo platform with the Coveo for Sitecore integration. So I can point my search page effectively at one query pipeline or another to apply those different kinds of synonym rules and so on as well to my search. And we can also include what we would call external content. And I'm going to switch over in just a second back to the Coveo Cloud platform to show you what we mean by that. But effectively, these would be other sources that you're indexing using Coveo outside of Sitecore, your blogs, your YouTube channel, and so on. So that's a super short look at the sorts of things that you can configure within Coveo for Sitecore. There are lots and lots more, whether it's the actual layout of your search results, what I often refer to as the result template, the different ordering and display options available to you here. Again, drag and drop components that you can edit here within your experience editor without necessarily having to get into code as well. With that, I'm just going to swap briefly back over into the Coveo Cloud Platform and again, show you just ideas of the sorts of data sources that Coveo can support. We have our Sitecore indexes here as well, but we also have indexes that point at YouTube channels, websites that we've indexed via a sitemap connector. We have our indexing API, our push API for integration to, for example, custom databases, integration to Salesforce content, and whoops, that's not what I meant to click on at all. And a wide variety of other kinds of data sources as well. So depending on your requirements for internal or external search, Coveo can support in quite a variety of ways the sorts of data sources that are going to be important to you. And again, we'd be super happy to talk to you about this or any other questions you might have regarding Coveo for Sitecore. Let's swap back over into here and just briefly talk about, because we're getting towards the end of our time, some of the steps involved in migration from GSA to Coveo. I really think the first step is probably the most important, understanding what it is that you need. Are you really looking at a simple like-for-like replacement? I just need a search box on my search page. Or are you looking for something more where you can tune relevance, where you can include additional content, where understanding user behavior is actually important to you. These are the sorts of factors that are going to play a large part in, well, how big of a project is this going to be, how much work is it going to be, and what are the good outcomes that potentially might come from it. A little bit of familiarization with what Coveo can provide, I think, feeds back into planning the service a little bit, thinking about, and certainly we'd be happy to help you with this, thinking about what Coveo can provide above and beyond what you have today. I think that informs also decisions you might make about the planning, the design of search functionality that you'll want. Again, getting a bit familiar with the what I call the Coveo for Sitecore framework, those sets of components and tools that allow you to build your search interface within Coveo. Again, that's potentially going to have going to feed back in a little bit of a loop, perhaps, into your planning process. And again, we'd be really happy to help you with that, as of course would our certified Coveo for Sitecore partners. I think also thinking about the roles and the people who are involved, the fourth item here about enabling the marketers to be autonomous, I think really tries to speak towards that capability for the content creators, if you will, the content managers within Sitecore to create, manage, configure, reconfigure the search experience. Not necessarily marketers, perhaps. It depends on the name of the kind of person that you have in your organization who's managing your Sitecore site. But it is enabling that person, those people, to have better control over how is search going to work and understanding the results of relevance and such on your site. And that really, I think, also speaks heavily towards the usage analytics. This is the sort of thing that I would say is on an ongoing basis, even after you've deployed Sitecore and Coveo for Sitecore. Improving your search results, understanding what your goals are, I think is also, I don't think we actually included that in this slide, but understanding what your goals are for your site. Is it trying to drive business, purchases? Is it a customer support sort of use case? Is it an informational site? All of these options are things that that you can measure with usage analytics and measure improvement as well. So you can't improve what you can't measure or monitor, of course. So I think that the planning your usage analytics and what to do about that usage analytics information is going to be a key part of any kind of project like this. And also, finally, looking potentially at new opportunities. How can we apply relevance to different aspects of site search, internet search, customer support search, and so on. Again, very happy to talk to you about our experiences with various customers at your convenience, of course. And just to wrap things up, I guess, before we go to any questions that may have come in, please feel free to reach out to us. Of course, we'll reach out to you since you've registered for this webinar as well. But Coveo.com, our website, /Sitecore, there's a site specifically for the Coveo for Sitecore integration. Lots of interesting information there, as well as a downloadable trial version, 30-day free trial of Coveo for Sitecore. I would suggest that downloading the trial is the sort of thing that, and for that matter, creating a cloud instance of Coveo is the sort of thing that, of course, someone who's a Sitecore admin would be the kind of person to use, or to do that, or potentially something to do in conjunction with Coveo or our network of partners that you're probably already working with as well. With that, thank you very much for attending, and Clara, and open it up to any questions that may have come in.
Thank you, Paul. We do have a few questions. If any of our attendees still have a question that they haven't shared with us, please feel free to do so in the question panel to your right. So I'm going to start with the first question we have for you, Paul. Do you typically recommend hiding the additional options for facets, talking about ends, /or, and facet sorting?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would, but it kind of depends on the use case you've got and what your users are like. If that's not too vague a statement. I think my personal opinion, most users on, say, a product search website or an informational website aren't looking to do really complex Boolean combinations of selections and such. They really just want, I just want to click a checkbox and search for some words and get my results. The ability to do things like say, oh, I want to differentiate between, if I've selected multiple values from a facet, for example, do I want to combine those together as a Boolean and versus a Boolean or? Frankly, I think most people don't think very much about that, and any options like that might be a little confusing to them. That said, if your audience is more like, I often think of a librarian kind. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a specification on the audience, which is researchers.
Perfect. Oh, sir, go ahead.
Yeah. So he just mentioned that he was talking about researchers.
Yeah, okay. That's funny. I was about to use that as a kind of example. I often think of librarians or researchers as being the kind of people for whom that kind of option is gold. They love to be able to do these more advanced options. So yeah, absolutely. For researchers, librarians, advanced power users, quote unquote, I think that providing as many options as possible is probably the sort of thing that they like. You might do that on a separate search page, perhaps. You might have a very simplified, stripped down, single search bar, single search box, simple facet main page, and then a link to an advanced search page where, hey, all of the options are there, Boolean search, fielded search, combining together facets in all kinds of interesting ways. That would be, my personal take on that.
Sounds good. Thank you for answering. We do have more questions. Next one will be, can Coveo be used to index generic sites or pages that are external to the main site? If so, is this what the sitemap connector provides functionality for?
Yeah, great question. I didn't actually go into much detail on that. I will just briefly here. Absolutely, yes. That's the sitemap connector is often used for that. We do also have what we call a web connector, which is more of a traditional web crawler. And just to show you the difference between those really quickly, we can essentially with the web crawler say I want to index, I start with a particular URL, I define some rules for inclusion or exclusion of domains within that website, and there are some other options here around how frequently do we want to recrawl and how quickly do I want to ask for more pages. So that's one approach. The sitemap is a little different, and it's great for websites where they can expose an XML or HTML sitemap to us, essentially telling us here are all the links that I want you to crawl. It can be a very quick and simple way to index many different kinds of content management systems. And honestly, we're seeing this one used a great deal, again, for non-Sitecore websites, blogs, WordPress sites, those sort of things. Adobe Experience Manager, it works really well with as well. So yeah, absolutely. The web and sitemap connectors are probably the most common approach we take to indexing non-Sitecore content.
Perfect, thank you. We do have another question. Coveo can scan other sites. Can non-Sitecore sites use the Coveo indexes for their results?
Great question as well. Yes, I didn't really touch on that at all today. But in addition to those components that I showed you within Sitecore to build your search experience, like that, these same components are available really as standalone JavaScript search framework, and we have many customers who embed them into their non-Sitecore sites. So I'd be happy to share examples of how to do that. It's really quite straightforward to do. What we don't have, I guess, is this sort of editor embedded into, say, for example, WordPress or Drupal to create your search page. Instead, you would take those JavaScript components, and we can talk about this further if you reach back out to us, and embed them into or put them into search pages that are hosted on WordPress or Drupal or whatever your AEM or whatever your website is running on. But yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, can intranets be scanned using cloud?
Yes, that's an interesting question as well. There's a couple of different approaches to that, depending on your requirements. So as I'd shown really briefly, there are many different kinds of sources that we can index, not just websites, of course, but also SharePoint, which we'd index via its API, Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, and so on. If the content that we're trying to index through whichever of these connectors you want is behind your firewall, for a corporate intranet, of course, there are two main options to index it. One is to actually open an inbound port in your firewall to a very specific IP address range for our cloud indexing connectors. And that's appropriate for some cases. Of course, it is always authenticated. We're able to authenticate against any of these types of data sources. So you would use a specific account of yours in order to create that source. There is also potentially for some data sources inside your organization an ability to deploy a component of Coveo within your intranet. We call it an on-premises crawling module. Now, the index itself still lives in the cloud, but this crawling module knows how to connect to your internal file shares or databases or SharePoint on premises, perhaps, and push that content in much the same way that our Coveo for Sitecore package does, push that content on a scheduled or scheduled basis typically to Coveo to be indexed in the cloud. In that case, you don't actually need to open up an inbound port in the firewall. You just need to allow outbound traffic. I hope that helps. And again, this is obviously a relatively short discussion of these questions, so we'd be happy to talk about them further at your convenience.
Thank you, Paul, for answering those questions. I don't see any more in the queue, so I think now is going to be a great time to wrap up. Just a couple of quick reminders before we sign off. We'll send the recording to all attendees within the next 24 hours, and please remember to help us improve future webinars by completing the brief survey at the end of the session. On behalf of Paul and the rest of the team, I'd like to thank you for attending our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.